Guest Counselor at GD Goenka World School. Next, last but not the least, Mr. Naqi Abbas, Director at Enable Employability Excellence Private Limited. This company offers employability solutions for students, colleges, and employers. He has a PhD diploma in PMIR from XLRI. He worked as an associate director at Dr. Reddy's lab. And prior to this, he was associated with CET Limited as a senior manager, where he has worked on Greenfield project at Bangladesh after studying local HR environments and local laws, etc. So it's good to have you all four with us. A very warm welcome. So without going further, I'm having a quick announcement for our attendees. So if you're having any questions, any queries during today's session, please type them into your question answer box so that we can raise them up at the end of the session. So now, what is the broadened meaning of inclusion in this normal, and how organization can demonstrate an inclusive minded culture during the coronavirus pandemic? I would like to ask Dr. Anindita Banerjee to give her insights on this.
Thank you so much, Anchal. I hope I'm kind of clearly audible to everybody. And Anchal, I have shared a few slides. If I can,
yeah, I'm just stopping sharing my screen, and you can just start. Is there any issue, Dr. Anindita?
No, I'm sorry. I thought the screen will come with the slides.
You can share your screen if you're comfortable.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought it's kind of coming from the other side. Okay, so this is fine.
Yeah.
And in terms of slide changing, Anchal, will you be able to help me with that?
Okay. You can do this from your end, Dr.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's great. So it's kind of, it's not moving. I'm sorry, but I'm not able to change the slide at my end.
That you can do from your navigation buttons.
One minute, or should I just share my screen? Will that be easier?
Dr. Anindita, if I may suggest, it will be good if you share your screen.
Yeah, so let me kind of just do that. Okay. So everybody is able to see it. Should I just minimize the... Everybody is able to see the screen. Anchal, if you can just...
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Now we can see it.
Okay. So I'm going to bring this up during the session. So let me see. Let me just integrate that. Okay. So I'll start off first, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to Inclusify for inviting me to be a part of the panel discussion. I'm going to talk about the broadened meaning of inclusion. I work in this space, and I thought it will be an interesting topic for us to think deeply on. So before we get started on inclusion, I think a good starting point will be to look at what is inclusion. Let's understand the meaning of inclusion. And I was thinking, what was down the memory lane? What was my first brush with inclusion as a concept? And it took me way back as I think it was around 6-year or a 7-year-old. That's when I came across this concept of inclusion. And it was thanks to my parents. At home, my parents and there was my sister and myself, the 4 of us. So my parents started this concept of family decision making. So where they got all of us together, we sat at the dining table. It was unfortunately not a round table discussion. It was more a square table discussion. And my parents will, put up the problem or the situation that needs to be discussed and decisions were to be taken. And there, as 4 individuals with equal space for sharing our views, for discussing, for asking questions, we would have a family discussion. And topics were, I was just trying to recollect a couple of topics, and the ones that came to my mind, pretty big one, now that I come to think of it. One was on when my father got a job offer, but that needed relocation outside Delhi, where we were. So that was one that we discussed. There was another one where I remember my parents had bought a flat, and of course we were paying the installment. So the discussion was around how do we manage the home finances so that we are able to balance out this installment payment with the the expenses on the household. On hindsight, I think my parents did it to teach us about decision making, to voice our opinion, to share. But I think it was a pretty good lesson in inclusion as well. And just the validation of the fact that your voice is heard. It's not only you have a voice, but also the fact that your voice is heard and heard by adults. So I'll start with that. And if you look at the definition of inclusion that I've put on the side, it's the action or state of including or of being included within a group or structure. So it works both ways, the definition. It's including others as well as being included. So with that as the backdrop, I want to move forward in the sense that most of us, we are either interested in this topic or we are, practitioners like myself, where we are strategizing it or looking at, implementations and concepts and how do we create inclusion in an organization. And there are some of us who are implementers, and there are some of us who experience it at the other end in terms of, experiencing inclusion initiatives and policies. Now, for that as the backdrop in terms of how things were a couple of months back, let's take a sidestep at this point in time, and especially, looking at what's happening around, let's take a sidestep and understand this, as a journalist would say, a developing story. This entire pandemic is pretty much like a developing story with, I don't think anybody has very clear idea of what's going to happen, short term, mid-term, long term, how the world is going to be, what's going to be the new normal. But even within that, we are all observing, wrapping our head around the new developments, the new challenges, and trying to understand and find solutions. So I've just highlighted here a few points that's worth kind of keeping in mind when we are looking at a sidestep and the broadened meaning in today's context. So one is, of course, this entire fear of infection and the concept of social distancing, having the mask on. And these are pretty, interesting concepts to bring into the Indian context, looking at it from a cultural perspective, because we are pretty much a culture with almost zero personal space. And for us to visualize a world which has social distancing as a norm. And this is whether when people are coming back to work or students go back to school or socially. So social distancing is a big challenge when we think or strategize around inclusion. The other one is, of course, the stress and the anxiety. Many of us may have worked in the area of VUCA, but we are seeing VUCA pretty much playing out around us each and every day over the past few months. And of course, there is stress and anxiety related to it. So, I mean, even on a health front, for instance, there are many of us who are thinking whether, the immediate family, the extended family will make it through the other end of the tunnel, or will I have financial security at the other end of the tunnel? So these are things which need to be kept in mind when we are thinking about inclusion. Likewise, family, I mean, a big component. And if I can have a parallel there, it's pretty much taken the center stage. Family, it's the hub of activities. It's like a container within which is keeping us safe from this unknown, dangerous virus. It's also for many of us who are privileged to have had our work transitioned online or virtual, is giving us that space to continue to work, to study. And the home is pretty much like a cluster of these activities going on parallelly with its own set of challenges, of course, and many of you, I'm sure, must be facing it. This also brings in evolving roles. Like for many of us, it's not only as a professional, but somebody who's managing the household. We are managing our role as a primary caregiver to elderly parents or small children. Without much of a support staff, we are also the entire household related responsibilities are there. And we are also now tutors or teachers for our young children as well. And this, of course, has even from an economic point of view, people generally talk about the fact that women take on a significant part of this. There is a paid component of work and an unpaid component. So this unpaid component of work, women tend to take on a significant part of it. And today they have additional responsibilities in many households, apart like whether they're working or not working. Working, of course, it's further added to their work responsibilities. Now, similarly, on the work front, I think the first thing that people are thinking about is what is the notion of a workplace? So it's no longer a nice to have future of work kind of a research. It's here and now. What is the notion of workplace? Also, the nature of problem people are grappling with, trying to figure out whether it is repurposing your supply chain or production so that you are able to factor in green zone and red zone, or when employees do start coming back, how do you plan the workspace? Or for instance, TCS the other day announced that almost 75% will be working from home. So how do you have the systems and the backup and the processes, and also very new scope of problem that people are facing? And then, of course, the divide, the out group, in group. It's not just the out group, in group in a conventional sense that we used to talk about, but today there are out group, in group, even in terms of digital natives and digital migrants. So I'll just take a minute to quickly explain this concept. I know many of you are already familiar with it, and I pretty much demonstrated it as I was trying to get my slide to come up. So digital native are, the younger generation, people who are born into the digital age. So the understanding or learning how to use that is a part of their natural learning, just like learning to walk or learning to talk. For us digital migrants, there is a before and after. So it's a transition, it's a journey. We have actually unlearned, learned, relearned, and getting more comfortable with it as days go by. So this is just a few of the challenges in light of the context today in terms of COVID-19. But it's not all challenges. There are also some very clear benefits that are emerging. I'm just going to talk about a few of these. Some of the positive implications on inclusion. And for somebody like me, who for the past 2 decades, almost 3/4 of my work years have been work from home. So it's a nice thing that's happening around, where work from home is getting normalized. There aren't that many questions or curious looks of what do you do at home when you say you work from home. And as a consequence of that is also the increased participation of marginalized groups or underrepresented groups so far in organizations. So let's take the case of women we discussed just now. They will be able to participate more in the workforce, given the work from home getting more normalized. Not only that, I mean, people with disability, although infrastructure ramp up has been happening, but we still have a long way to go. And keeping that in mind, for them to think of a serious career while working out of home to get started, I think that's a nice development that can happen. Of course, the third one is more around generational inclusion. We have, as I said, the digital native and the migrant. So now pretty much, I think we can having a situation where leveling of the playing field is happening. While the younger generation is coming in with their, the digital comfort, or the fact that a lot of the problems are new normal, where a Gen X or a baby boomer talking about, in the year 1980, this is what used to happen, doesn't have that much of a relevance, because a lot of the things need to be looked through fresh eyes and new filters. So somewhere, and there is a nice reverse mentoring, learning, relearning, unlearning that's happening, which if done in the right spirit, can be a great thing for generational inclusion as well. And of course, scope for virtual collaboration, both from a domestic as well as a global context. It's not only that, IT or technology savvy companies, it's also manufacturing, it's SMEs that are looking at going virtual. So it's going to be a huge boom. So, and as I said, as the quote says, that new type of problem, you need more people who have different way of thinking, different experiences, and that's what's going to add a lot of value. So I think it's a good time for inclusion, need to be strategized. Moving on, how do we build inclusion given the context that we are talking about? Empathy, I think at the basic foundation, inclusion and empathy pretty much go hand in hand. And empathy, just to give you a very simple way to look at it, it's putting yourself in another person's shoes. And before we do that, we have to make sure we take off our own shoes. Our own shoes are our judgments, biases, our assumptions, the stereotypes. So for example, for a manager, getting a request from a female team employee that can we relook at the deadlines and the timeline, instead of questioning the commitment of that team member, it'll be nice to look at that situation through empathetic eyes basically, and ears, and understand where the issues are, where the constraints are, look at what the objectives are, look at the situation today, and co-create timelines, keeping the organization or the client objectives in mind. Listening to understand as against listening to respond. Just calling people, team members, especially for HR or even managers and all, or even professors, calling up students, understanding, just be the sounding board. There is a lot of stress building up, a lot of anxiety. Having ears that listen without judgment, it's a huge plus, and really great for building that spirit of inclusion. Creating connection, people are feeling lonely with lockdowns and no socialization. Even you have just the connection is missing. So creating these avenues for connection, which could be hangouts, which could be people can just do calls, organizations maybe can look at ways to create those platform or give some data support. So some of those things can be looked into. Reaching out and support, if you, for instance, if you find somebody struggling with digital working or virtual working, reaching out one-on-one and helping them, supporting them, that will go a long way. And of course, I mean, none of this is new. It's what we talk about in inclusion, but the concept is the same, the context is new. So microaggressions, for example, it could be, somebody who's not very familiar with these, virtual meetings. And every time the other 10 people in the meeting keep correcting, hey, put your mic on, we can't hear you. Put your video on, we can't hear you. Come on, what are you doing? So that builds up pressure. The person feels overwhelmed and intimidated and might just feel like an out group in that meeting. Or, I mean, if you're having a meeting and you ask people to post questions, but somebody keeps their mic on and asks question and that get answered and the ones on the chat doesn't get. So these are small elements, but it's important to look into so that we start make people feel included across contexts.
Yeah, that's a very good point you have raised here, Dr. Anindita.
Yeah,
so let's.
So I'll just finish. Last slide is there. I'm done. Yes. I know I may have I overstepped on time?
No, you can just go ahead.
Yeah. So just last one, and then I'm kind of off. As I wrap up, I just wanted to leave you with these two images of where we are today. One is, of course, it's no longer me, my family, my organization, my team. We need to think about the community at large, because the sooner the community recovers, the sooner the country recovers, the sooner each and every one of us will be able to get back to the normal life. And they need a lot of support. So that's one. And second, I was talking about empathy. I think this picture, I don't know, many of you may have even seen it. It's been circulating on online platform. This is doctors, and this is a beautiful example of empathy. A doctor under stress, so much of healthcare is really at a war zone, but to just take this step, thinking, putting themselves in the patient's shoes and trying to imagine on the bed with an unknown virus, battling for his life, and seeing doctors, no faces, all with these hazmat sets, just putting the picture is a beautiful example of creative solutions towards inclusion. So thanks a lot. This is what I had to share. We'll look forward to questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anindita. So if we move ahead, we are having Apurva Shrivastava. So Mr. Apurva, what do you think? How we can navigate the transitions to remote work during COVID-19?
Hello, good afternoon all. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. First and foremost, thank you, Inclusify, for giving me this opportunity to be your panel discussion. And just a few thoughts, and I don't have any slides, but I echo, a lot of things which Dr. Anindita mentioned. First and foremost, this is not a productivity contest, it's a pandemic. So please don't expect employees to, do some multiple online trainings, complete some assessments, take some certifications. Everyone is dealing with stress, there are friends, there are families out there, it's a global pandemic. So, three, basic factors, I think, which leaders should be having in this time, more from a change management perspective. Communication. I think that's the primary, factor. Collaboration and trust and empathy. Very similar to what Dr. Anindita mentioned. If you are communicating well with your employees, and you are concerned as an employer for their health and general well-being, I think that takes a lot of stress from the employees. Collaboration, right? We work in a globally connected world now. So the more you collaborate, with your teams, different, co-located, multiple teams everywhere, I think that will reduce a lot of stress from your side and from your work as well. And the third and the most important is trust and empathy. How much you as a leader trust your co-workers. We all used to say that, digital transformation is something, which will be the next wave from 2016 onwards. Which one factor, made all of us digital, I think is COVID-19, This one factor, made all of us digital. There is no playbook around this. None of the companies had BCP. I work in a bank, and considering the data privacy around all the activities, what we do, work from home is a big no-no. Within 1 week, 90% of our employees in India are working from home seamlessly. So I think COVID-19 was a big factor to, enable this. I see, there are some positive aspects out of this global pandemic. Maybe, firms are more now on, they are protecting workers. I see a lot of, advocacy around this from leaders. There is an increased focus on personal productivity, well-being and personal resilience as well. That's happening across firms. There's a huge growth opportunity, for leaders. I mean, I think your leadership skill is tested during these times. I think that's a personal, learning for all of us. And when you say about CEO, I call it now the Chief Empathy Officer. You know, I mean, I think that's the new role which has come out of this global pandemic. So from a change management perspective, yes, I think, the sooner we adopt to this change, it's better for all of us. And yes, maintain collaboration, maintain empathy towards your coworkers. And please always remember at the back of your mind, it's not a productivity contest, guys. It's a global pandemic. So it's fine if you're not doing any, certifications or online learnings. That's fine. We all are, just waiting and praying for this pandemic to get over and, be back to the normal.
Obviously, we are all waiting to this pandemic to be over. Anything else which you want to add on, Mr. Apurva?
No, I think I think this post COVID-19, I mean, I keep on telling this to my team that this is AC and BC, after COVID and before COVID. So the world will be very different, I mean, they say social distancing, and we are social animals, right? Man is a social animal. The whole concept of, change management is all around, how much, people, you're able to, navigate the complexities of change by involving people, process and technology. So I think, everything is going to change now, post this pandemic gets over. Hopefully, I'm praying that, this gets over in next 1 to 2 months time, and we will see a lot more focus on work from home, employee productivity, mental wellness, health. I think yeah.
So yeah, surely we're going to see a whole new world after this pandemic.
Yeah.
So now I want to ask you, Mrs. Ritu, what are the mental health and psychosocial consideration during COVID-19 outbreak? So I would like you to answer this. You are on mute, Ritu.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, so I've got used to asking this question because I have been doing back-to-back webinars every day. As I was sharing with you before we started today, that's the new normal for me also, for a professional like me. I deal with a lot of students. So that also brings me on a very, I would say, I'm quite educated by them because they are so savvy, and I feel very comfortable as compared to the first day when I had to come on a webinar. So I guess that's the positive of the outcome positive of this COVID-19 brought us digitally one. We're all together in this. Okay, so the question that you asked me, it's a very heavy question. I don't think I have an answer fully for that. We also do not have an analysis of this entire period because we don't know how long this period is going to last. I know I have a few colleagues who've started doing some research on some small surveys to understand the stressors and the levels of stresses in different communities at the moment. But as I was reading the other day in different reports across from so many mediums and journals, I think this is one of the largest psychological experiment that is going on. We've never had such a big psychological experiment in the history of this earth, I guess, on this earth. So we don't know what is there, what it unfolds, what it unfurls. We'll all have to wait and see. But for the moment, in the present, I have a few suggestions which I also give to myself and the people around me. Just a word of a few cautions, I guess, for most of us who are experiencing any kind of stress, any recurring negative thoughts, anxiety, a huge sense of loneliness. I do have a few people around me and some parents, students who do complain of loneliness. There are students who are stuck in various places, who could not make it back to their countries while they were studying. My own son, for example, is not with me at the moment. He's in US and I'm here, though fortunately he's with his family. But that sense of uncertainty, which we've been talking about for the last 3 months almost, is very much prevalent, be it a professional who had all, who was very well equipped to handle all of that, or be it a commoner. You don't know who's going to surprise one another in this period. At the end of the day, we're all grappling humans, you know. So the feeling of sadness is another one that I've been getting calls for. A slight feeling of disconnectedness. I think what Dr. Banerjee said, that this is a time to connect with people. I would also urge, let us all come together and connect with people, connect with your family members wherever they are. That might give them a sense of belongingness in this period. Another word of caution, in case any of these feelings are persistent, I think that's one time you should be seeking some sort of assistance from professionals. We have witnessed, I think, hundreds of virtual clinics have come into existence in this last quarter, I guess. So, my own general physician has gone virtual. I have so many psychiatric friends, psychiatrist friends who have gone virtual. So please seek help from, these self-help clinics and even otherwise clinics where you may be sitting in a place where it's very lonely and you don't know how to reach out. We could seek help of these the virtual clinics. It's a big paradox, I think, and a dilemma for some of us. On one hand, we say, reach out virtually to people because that's the only medium we can reach out. But at the same time, here's me telling so many youngsters that, please spend less time on the virtual medium, because that's, also very stressful in itself. You have a lot of these pop out information which is negative and floating all over the place. It induces a lot of negative thoughts in some of us when we know there's a big prevailing negativity around us. So to refrain from those negative news, the mass media is giving us every moment, that's one refrainment. I think we can refrain from those. Coming to our daily functioning, I think we have to and we must maintain our routines. Wasn't there a time when most of us who were working complained of, oh, I don't get time, working mothers and fathers, with their children? So here's one time, though not for the best of the reasons, but we do have abundance of time. So let's utilize that time in the best ways we can, probably exploring some of our hidden talents, which are doable in the confines of our homes, something of a hobby kind or an interest that you always wanted to bring out in you, painting, be it music. I have my husband who sits with his harmonium every day and he's wanting to come back to his fondness for music. So my daughter who is learning online, pianos. So things like that, I think, is the way forward for at least the period, as long as we don't know. Uh, these are some of the things I think from the psychological point of view, to maintain our sanity, to have a well-being in place, to be fit mentally as well as physically. I think that's another thing we need to caution ourselves from, avoiding heavy foods, sitting at home, because it's very tempting to, for those who don't have much of work. Unfortunately, there are a lot of large groups who don't have work also because their works were dependent on a non-virtual platform. So for those, I think they are indulging in binge watching, Netflix or all these channels, that movies and series. You tend to overeat. I think that's another thing I'd like to mention, that please do not do that. Go for lighter foods, do your exercise, whatever possible exercises that are available to you within your confines, again, in housebound. uh, I guess that's something pretty much from my side. I think just keep a watch on your stressors, the levels of stresses, because sometimes when you slip into uh, the negative zones, we don't know. I mean, if I talk psychologically, that's something you need to be a little aware of. So we don't want to have a situation where it's a little damaging and a little non-repairable, and you need to seek help of some professional out there. So that's pretty much in your hands to resort to some nicer ways which are available to you virtually. Please get into some sort of relaxing techniques, some strategies that are very readily available on the virtual medium. Maybe you can invest your time and very carefully routine yourself in such a way where you align it with the time that's available to you, and the routines that you were following, you follow those routines. There is a very important uh, aspect here which brings it's on a humane level, is to indulge in some sort of meditation. Have faith in your belief system. Resort to that little spiritual aspect of humans. Try and connect to that spiritual well-being also that each one of us are. We know there is a lot of negativity outside. We know there is an uncertainty. That's a fact, we know. But the need of the hour is to come straight on it and deal with it, cope with it, manage it well, to become that happy individual within your homes.
So
So
yeah, Ritu, so here I feel that a lot of people will go through anxiety and stress issues. How will the company tackle this? Will they have a full-time psychologist on the company's payroll to take care of the staff mental health? How exactly is the leadership planning to help the workforce?
it's very interesting what Mr. Apurva just mentioned. Today only I received a very nice SMS from my bank saying that we have a webinar with Dr. Deepak Chopra for you. So I was, oh, okay, I hope I'm reading the correct message. This is a bank, and I mean, Deepak Chopra has come there. So it was very interesting to see that, some of the conscious attempts being made by lot of companies. And I'm also working full time with another school. Our school is doing a lot of things. We are in the well-being team, and we have well-being sessions every day for the students. We have webinars for the parents every day on well-being. So I think it's a call all employers have to take, because that's I mean, I was reading another report today shared by another friend of mine, where fear was the study. So how many people are going to be afraid of going, or going to be fearful of joining back their workplaces if at all we enter the non-virtual spaces again and go back to our offices? Those figures were very scary again, because they weren't very nice to see that it was almost 60 to 75% of people said across all countries they don't want to go back. They have that fear of, what if we catch the infection, what if it happens to us. So I
Truly, it
think
is
this
happening.
well-being aspect needs to really crop in very well, and it has to be implemented as a mandate for most of the companies that can afford it. And I mean, it's not about affordability. I guess it's also about just having it there. You don't need very expensive expense on mental well-being, and keeping well your employees, keeping a check on their mental and physical health. So that's something I think all companies will have to invest eventually in, and that's the need of the hour.
Yeah, it's a really helpful answer you have given, Ritu. So
Thank
now
you.
I want to take it to Mr. Naqi Abbas. So as the pandemic changed job market, how to prepare tomorrow's workforce? This will be a very big question uh, today. So what do you think about this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon for setting up this platform where we are going into we are looking at a scenario post this situation, and we are trying to find out what we can do about it. Yeah. So a bit of a context here. So first of all, when I got the invite for this panel meet, I asked Akash bhai, what is it going to be about? So he said it's going to be something around employability, skilling, and all that. So I thought, it is my bread and butter, and it's par for the course. But when I got the mail, it said that it's something like the world post COVID-19. I was like, my God, I don't know. I mean, and I wish somebody around us knows what kind of a world is going to emerge out of all this. So I think there is let's acknowledge there is a whole lot of uncertainty. What is going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen on the 4th of May. I mean, forget beyond that, right? So with that context, but still there are few trends, there are few things which remain in our control, which remain in the control of the job seeker, the student, the new graduate, and I would like to focus on that. Yeah. So first is, uh, I mean, there has been a lot of, you can say, all kinds of criticism around, this education, whether it is linked to some outcome, employability or lack of it, our education system having all kind of problems. So I think what we are very clearly looking at is the job seeker needs to refocus on the ability to get something done, on the ability to do something, because that is what will command respect from the employer, and not your degree or your references or your pedigree or your years of experience, right? So what is that specialization? What is it that you can do? What is it that you can put up your hand and say, "Ki here, this is my area of specialization." I think that is one. Second is this whole piece around being able to learn online. So suppose I did not get admitted to IIT, right? But today on NPTEL, on SWAYAM, all these courses are available. I don't need to regret or worry about it. All that material is available from the best of universities, colleges around the world, right? So be prepared to learn from anywhere. And the good part is ki, I'm sure there will be a growing acknowledgement, and there will be a growing credibility and recognition around online learning, right? Earlier, whenever we used to ask, are you from a regular course, are you from an online course, are you from a distance course, right? And we had a pecking order in our mind that somebody who has come from an online channel is the best, right? And somebody who could not go to the full-time course, it's because you could not do it, so you settled for something else. So I think that's a clear change. We will see that the online learning will get a lot more respect. Maybe we will even see some kind of a regulation coming into it. At the moment, it is completely unregulated. That may be coming in. And the third piece is, I think we are looking at an era where permanent jobs are going to be a rarity. This trend was already sometime in coming, where we were moving towards a gig economy, where uh, you are employed for a certain skill, and it's not a tenure, right? So whether you call it fixed time employment, you call it freelancing, you call it gigs economy, the more we embrace it, I think the less stress it will cause, because I think that's a very clear trend I foresee as far as the world of work is going to be. Yeah. So I'll summarize. First is focus on specializing, focus on your ability to get something done, and not be be very attached to your degree or your years of experience or reference or anything. Second, be prepared to learn from anywhere. Today, not being able to learn, not being able to access material is not an excuse anymore. The best of the courses from the best of the faculty around the world are available for you. And the third, be open to jobs which are not necessarily permanent. It's not a stigma anymore. It's going to be the norm, as we move forward. Over to you, Anchal.
So there is a very interesting question directly for you, Mr. Abbas. So what leadership capabilities would you recommend frontline managers, middle managers to practice during work from home to manage self and when managing a team?
Very interesting question. I think this is partly addressed by somebody said chief empathy officer. I think Apurva said that. So it's a time where the leaders need to demonstrate a lot more empathy. They need to demonstrate, I guess somewhere if, we are used to expecting a lot of, certainty and a firmness from our leaders. And when we see vulnerability, we somehow feel, they're not the right person to lead us. So I think it's okay to show vulnerability because people are able to relate to you better. The best part about this whole scenario is we are all in it together. It's not something happening in some part of the world and it's not happening to me, right? It's happening to all of us. So the leaders need to give that much more I would say room to their people to adapt to the new situation, be more empathetic and communicate more via a face-to-face channel rather than channels like messaging or mailing. I think whenever there is a conflict, we should reach out for some and not resort to asynchronous channels like messaging or mailing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abbas. So now we're having a very interesting question from a mother. So I request Dr. Banerjee to have a look on this question, and I'd like to ask you all to give your insights on these questions. So she's asking, too much of screen time is a challenge for mothers like me. 6 hours of school online and then online chatting, games, and being watching TV. How we can deal with this? It's a very interesting question. Nowadays, every mother is facing this issue.
Fathers can also respond. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. But Dr. Anindita, please.
Yeah. So I think, it's a question that many of us, and I think Ritu also spoke about it briefly, how the messaging earlier had been don't go online, not too much. And now probably when you're balancing a lot of things, sometimes that's the space, the me time that you get, or the space you get to finish off some of the work. So how do you create, I think what is very important at this stage, and especially for young children, is a sense of routine. So if you are able to instill, the day is still a 24-hour, and if we look at an 8-hour of a sleep time and an 8-hour of work time and an 8-hour of, your eating and playing. And so even for children, if we can figure out a routine or a discipline that we help them follow, that's one. So that if there is a total of maybe 6 hours or 5 hours, including, school time and their own TV watching time, or whatever games they want to play, or even books nowadays you have on Kindle. So whatever it is they're doing, it's correctly spaced out, so that, keeping the eye and the mind and we don't, and the posture. So keeping all of this in mind, I think the schedule is important. The second thing, this I'll just add, I've been hearing this from a lot of mothers, and being a mom myself with the kids at home, this is something we are also trying to practice. But a lot of women and men as well, both, parents are talking about the fact that a lot of, there is a role evolution. So a lot of children are volunteering, or they are taking on responsibilities in the household chores. So it's a great time to create those, the star charts and getting them engaged, give them points, especially young kids, so that you get them productively engaged. They are also learning the dignity of labor, and these are all non-virtual works. I don't know if that kind of answers, but these are some quick thoughts.
So now I would like to ask this question to the fathers in this meeting.
Yeah.
So Mr. Abbas or Mr. Apurva, if you want to answer this question.
Yeah. So I'll just take a quick minute. I have a 8-year-old daughter, and by the grace of God, she's not very, we have raised her in a way that, she's not on screen. She's not addicted to the screen time. But we have specified a 2-hour limit for her, that you can spend 2 hours at the max with a screen. So mobile is off, not allowed. So she can spend 2 hours playing whatever games. Now, what do I do outside of those 2 hours? Yeah. So we realized that normally this is the time when, they would have been enjoying their summer vacations, that they would have been with their cousins. This is the time when we kind of they are let go. So we try to, we have a schedule, something like a home Olympics. We play a lot of board games. We play some, and there are points. She gets some point. Other parents get some point. Then there is some religious education. So so we have been trying to teach her Quran. So sometimes she ends up teaching us that Papa, this is not pronounced like this. This is how you pronounce it. Yeah. So sum and substance is ki there is a clear cut boundary on the screen time. That can't increase, and if that is broken, there is a punishment that next day laptop is not available to you. So something like that. Some things are working out, and some things are still work in progress.
That is really great, Mr. Abbas. Anything from your side, Mr. Apurva?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, that discipline still has to be maintained, among kids as well. I have a 3-year-old kid, and the screen time is restricted to 1 hour, the Chota Bheem and the Superman types, on a daily basis. And we try to, engage him through other activities. He loves role play. So, sometimes he becomes the cook, sometimes he becomes Papa, sometimes he becomes Mama, he starts cooking in the kitchen and all those stuff. So yeah, those activities, should keep him busy. But yes, screen time is restricted to 1 hour. I think that discipline one has to follow, being a parent.
So I'll just add to that one more line. I think the challenge remains the same, whether we were working during working hours or not. The challenge is the same, how to keep them engaged. So I think a list of activities, if we can, jot them down to keep them engaged and give them a variety of activities that they are engaged with, depending on the age group of the children. Some of them, you have a teenager at home, they just don't want you around. So now they don't have a choice. You're right there. They know your routine. You know their routine so well. So I guess just getting, those list of activities which keep them engaged, which they enjoy within the confines of the home again, will work, So like I said, for my daughter, she would always complain she didn't have a class for piano because of her busy schedule. Here you have provisions on online to, learn them. So things like that, I guess. Baking, she loves baking. So baking is one activity which happens on the weekend once she's had her classes, her set of 4 or 5 days of working virtually. So I think we all have to find out what our children like, what are their interests. And I think there's no dearth of activities that we can engage them in.
Yeah, it's really helpful. So we have to increase the offline activities to secure our children from this situation. So it's time to wrap up. So I would like to thank everyone on the behalf of all our attendees. I would like to thank all honorable guests for today's session. Your insights are really very interesting, I must say, and very helpful for us. I think we have answered a lot of questions and we are having some more yet to be answered. So we will post them on our social media sites with the answers. Thank you so much all for attending this session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inclusify. Thank you for having us over. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.